The damaged ISS Resolve drifted through the uncharted sector of the Outer Rim, its navigation system still reeling from the gravitational anomaly they had encountered hours earlier. Through the viewport of the engineering bay, Travis Track Morgan watched the ghostly structure floating in the void before them. The alien vessel was massive, its hull bearing the telltale scars of a catastrophic battle. Parts of it still glowed with residual energy, casting an eerie blue-green light against the eternal darkness. Picking up residual power signatures, Lieutenant Maya Singh's voice crackled over the comms. Whatever hit this thing, it's still holding some juice. Track adjusted his tactical harness, the Navy-issue weapon at his side a reminder of his purpose here. Any match with the database? He asked, already knowing the answer. Negative. Configuration is unknown. Could be Gillian. But it's unlike anything we've documented. There was a pause. Command wants us to investigate. Particularly you. Morgan. Of course they did. Earth Naval Command hadn't reinstated him as a weapons engineer, just for his charming personality. After his disciplinary action for unauthorized modifications to a heavy assault rifle prototype, modifications that had saved lives during the Proxima incident, they'd kept him at arm's length. Until now. Until they needed someone who could think outside regulation parameters. Send me the scan data, Track said, moving toward the equipment locker. I'll prep for EVA. Maya's voice lowered. Command is particularly interested in weapons tech. The Galactic Coalition's been making noise about resource rights in the Cygnus sector. If this wreck has anything that could give us an edge. I get it, Track replied, his voice tighter than he intended. Find the big guns before they do. The boarding team consisted of 5. Track, 2 security specialists, a xenotech analyst, and Maya herself leading the operation. Their shuttle approached the massive derelict, which Track now recognized from its configuration as some kind of battlecruiser. As they drew closer, he could make out the name etched into the hull in an alien script that the computer translated as Celestial Fang. Appropriate, Track muttered, eyeing the sharp, predatory lines of the vessel. The interior of the Celestial Fang was a maze of darkened corridors, occasionally illuminated by faltering emergency lighting. The artificial gravity was still functioning in some sections, creating disorienting transitions as they explored deeper. The team moved methodically, scanning for both threats and technological treasures. It was in what appeared to be a weapons bay that Track found the first significant discovery. A control panel, miraculously still operational, displayed schematics of what could only be a particle acceleration weapon system. Maya, I've got something, Track called over the comm. You need to see this. The lieutenant arrived minutes later, her helmet lamp illuminating the intricate display. What am I looking at, Morgan? If I'm reading this correctly, and I am, it's a design for a directed energy weapon. But the scale... Track's voice trailed off as he navigated through the alien interface, intuiting its function through engineering principles that transcended species. This isn't just a ship-mounted cannon. This is planet-killer tech. Maya's breath caught audibly. Command will want this. It's not that simple, Track said, already analyzing the components. This is just the blueprint. The actual weapon would need a power source beyond anything we've developed. Something like... He paused, scrolling through more screens. There. That's what they used. They call it a nucleus core. It's the heart of the weapon system. Maya's expression was hidden behind her visor, but her voice betrayed her excitement. Can we find it? Track nodded slowly. The schematics indicate a secured chamber 3 levels down. But Maya... He turned to face her directly. This isn't just a bigger gun. This is giant destroyer-class technology. If Earth gets this, then the Coalition won't be able to push us around anymore, she finished for him. That's the point. Morgan, we need this advantage. Track wanted to argue, but swallowed his concerns. He'd been a soldier long enough to understand geopolitics. Or rather, astropolitics. Earth needed leverage in its ongoing tensions with the Galactic Coalition. And right now, that leverage was somewhere in the bowels of this dead alien warship. The team delved deeper into the vessel, following Track's guidance. The lower levels showed more battle damage, with sections exposed to vacuum, requiring careful navigation. Finally, they reached a sealed chamber with markings that the translator identified as high-security warnings. "This is it," Track said, examining the door mechanism. "The core should be inside." It took nearly an hour to bypass the alien security systems, during which time Track noticed Maya making several encrypted communications back to the Resolve. Standard procedure. But something about her tension put him on edge. When the massive door finally slid open, the chamber beyond bathed them in a soft blue glow. At its center, suspended in a containment field, was a crystalline device no larger than a human heart. It pulsed with inner light, like a living thing. "The nucleus core," Track breathed, approaching cautiously. His scanner showed energy readings unlike anything in Earth's technological catalog. "It's still active after all this time." "Can you extract it?" Maya asked, her voice tight with anticipation. Track studied the containment system. "Yes, but we'll need to—" A new sound interrupted him, the unmistakable hum of energy weapons powering up. Track spun around to find the security team with weapons raised, not at potential threats, but at him. "Maya, what the hell is this?" he demanded. The lieutenant removed her helmet, revealing a face set with determination rather than apology. "Change of plans. Morgan, we're turning this over directly to a different interested party." From the shadows behind her emerged several figures in sleek armor, unlike anything in Earth's arsenal. Their leader stepped forward, removing a helmet to reveal features that were almost human, but not quite. Skin too pale, eyes too large, with an otherworldly grace to every movement. "Lieutenant Singh has made a wise decision," the figure said, voice melodic yet cold. "The Galactic Coalition appreciates her cooperation." "You sold us out?" Track snarled at Maya. "To Korov Rex and his mercenaries?" "Her," corrected the alien with a thin smile. "And they're not mercenaries. We're Coalition Special Operations." "The Coalition's been offering Earth fair terms for years," Maya said, not meeting Track's eyes. "Command is too stubborn to accept them. This technology is too dangerous to be used as a bargaining chip in their game. So you betray your own people." Trace's hand inched toward his sidearm. Maya saw the movement. "Don't. Morgan, this is happening. The core is going to the Coalition, where it can't be weaponized." Korov Rex's laugh was like ice cracking. "Oh, it will still be weaponized, Lieutenant Singh. Just not by Earth. We simply can't allow your primitive planet to possess such leverage." Maya's head snapped toward the Xilian hybrid. "That wasn't our agreement." "Agreements evolve," Cora replied dismissively, gesturing to her team to secure the nucleus core. "As will the power structure of this sector, once we harness the giant destroyer." Track saw the realization of betrayal dawn on Maya's face, the same betrayal he felt. In that moment of confusion, he made his move, diving behind a console as energy beams lanced through the space he'd occupied a split second earlier. "Kill him!" Cora shouted. "And secure that core!" Chaos erupted in the chamber. Track returned fire, targeting the support systems of the containment field rather than the Coalition forces. Alarms blared as the nucleus core's housing destabilized, energy flaring wildly. "What are you doing?" Maya screamed over the din. "You'll kill us all!" "Better than giving them a planet killer!" Track shouted back, ducking as energy beams sliced through metal above his head. The core's containment field flickered, and in that moment, Track made a desperate lunge for the device. His fingers closed around it, just as a blast from Cora's weapon caught him in the side, searing through his suit and into flesh beneath. Pain exploded through his body, but his grip on the core remained firm. Emergency bulkheads began to close as the ship's ancient systems detected the instability. Track saw his opportunity. Clutching the core to his chest, he rolled through a closing doorway, sealing himself off from his pursuers. "Morgan!" Maya's voice came through his comm, panicked now. "The ship's breaking apart. We need to evacuate." Track didn't respond. Blood soaked his suit where Cora's weapon had hit him, and each breath brought fresh agony. But he kept moving, staggering through corridors as the vessel shuddered around him. He reached an escape pod bay, just as another violent tremor rocked the ship. Through a viewport, he saw the ISS Resolve disengaging, pulling away from the destabilizing wreck of the Celestial Fang. They were leaving. Without him. With the last of his strength. Track dragged himself into an alien escape pod. The nucleus core still clutched against him. His vision blurred as his blood-slick fingers attempted to decipher the launch controls. As consciousness began to fade, he felt the pod eject, tumbling away from the dying alien ship. His last coherent thought before darkness claimed him was that he'd failed. Not just his mission, but his principles. He'd wanted to prevent a weapon of mass destruction from falling into anyone's hands. And now, it was his burden alone. A burden he was likely carrying to his grave. The pod plummeted toward the barren world below, a tiny spark against the vast darkness of space. Pain was Track's first sensation upon waking, a burning agony in his side that sent him gasping back to consciousness. The second was the realization that he was alive at all. The escape pod had crashed. Its hull was cracked, emergency lighting casting red shadows across the interior. Outside, through the fractured viewport, he could see a desolate landscape of rust-colored rocks and dust under a blood-red sky. "System check," he croaked, habit from naval training taking over despite his situation. No response. The pod's AI was offline, or more likely, never designed for human interaction in the first place. Track forced himself to focus, to assess his situation methodically as his training demanded. The wound in his side had partially cauterized from the energy weapon, which had probably saved him from bleeding out. Still, infection was a very real threat. His EVA suit was compromised, but the atmospheric readings on his wrist computer showed the air outside was technically breathable, high in carbon dioxide and laced with metallic particulates, but not immediately fatal. And the nucleus core? Track's heart rate spiked as he felt for the device. It was still there, secured in the utility pouch of his suit, its gentle pulse of energy detectable even through the fabric. "Great," he muttered to the empty pod, stranded on a toxic rock with the most dangerous weapon component in the galaxy. Perfect end to a perfect day. Standing was an exercise in willpower. Each movement sent fresh waves of pain from his wound. But Track forced himself upright. He gathered what supplies remained in the pod, a medical kit with alien contents he'd have to decipher, some emergency rations that had been stored in his suit, and a portable data logger that had survived the crash. The landscape that greeted him outside the pod was as inhospitable as it had appeared. Jagged rock formations jutted from dusty plains, with no sign of vegetation or water. The horizon shimmered with heat, despite the dim sunlight filtered through thick clouds. Track's suit computer identified the planet as Talon Fa, a charted but uninhabited world in the system. The atmosphere was technically within survival parameters, but prolonged exposure would cause respiratory damage. His damaged suit would offer limited protection, but he needed shelter. A dust storm was gathering on the horizon, its approach visible as a wall of red-brown haze. Track oriented himself using the crashed pod as a reference point, and began a painful trek toward a series of rock formations that might offer some protection. Each step was agony, but the alternative was death by exposure or suffocation when the storm hit. He'd covered perhaps a kilometer when he spotted it. The unmistakable angular shape of artificial construction among the natural rock formations. Hope surged through him, giving new strength to his faltering steps. It was an abandoned research outpost, earth-made from the look of the prefabricated structures, now half buried in dust and showing signs of severe damage. The main dome had collapsed, but a subsidiary structure remained partially intact, its airlock dented but functional. Track reached it, just as the first gusts of the dust storm began to whip around him. The airlock cycling mechanism was offline, forcing him to manually crank it open and then close behind him. Inside, the air was stale but cleaner than outside. Emergency lighting flickered on as his movement triggered aging sensors. "Hello?" he called out, though he expected no response. According to his suit's database, no permanent human presence had been established on Talon Fu. This must have been a temporary research station, abandoned years ago. The interior confirmed his assessment. Dust covered everything, and much of the equipment had been stripped, likely when the station was officially decommissioned. But some basics remained. A water reclamation system that might still function, some stored emergency supplies, and most critically, a geothermal power tap that was miraculously still operational, providing minimal power to the station's essential systems. Track collapsed onto a chair that creaked dangerously under his weight. The reality of his situation was sinking in. The ISS Resolve had abandoned him. No one knew he was here. No one was coming to rescue him. He carefully extracted the nucleus core from his suit pouch, placing it on a dusty console. In the dim emergency lighting, its blue-green glow seemed more pronounced, pulsing like a heartbeat. "Just you and me now," he told it grimly, "on this rock at the edge of nowhere." The first days on Talon 4 were a desperate struggle for survival. Track's wound required immediate attention, and the alien medical kit from the escape pod proved both a blessing and a challenge. Through trial and error, he identified an antibacterial sealant that burned like fire when applied, but stopped the infection that had begun to set in. The station's water reclamation system required extensive repairs, forcing Track to ration the emergency supplies until he could get it functioning. Food would be a longer-term problem. The emergency rations would last perhaps 2 weeks at minimal consumption. As his physical condition stabilized, Track began a more thorough exploration of the abandoned outpost. Most of the scientific equipment had been removed, but the storage areas yielded treasures, spare parts, basic tools, and most importantly, a geological survey drone that was damaged but potentially salvageable. The drone became his first project. Working with limited tools and power, Track disassembled the machine, assessing which components could be repaired and which were beyond saving. Its propulsion system was irreparable, but the scanning equipment, sample collection mechanisms, and central processor were intact. "You'll be my eyes and hands," Track told the partially rebuilt drone as he rewrote its firmware using his data logger. "Can't exactly go sightseeing in this condition." He designated the reprogrammed drone ARC-9, retrofitting it with a crude mobility system using parts from the station's ventilation system. It wasn't pretty, but it could traverse the immediate area around the outpost, collecting samples and scanning the surroundings. The dust storm raged for 3 days before finally abating, allowing ARC-9 to venture outside. The drone's first mission yielded valuable data, a more detailed map of the surrounding terrain, confirmation of a water source, a subsurface reservoir accessible through a natural fissure 2 kilometers east, and most surprisingly, readings of unusual energy signatures emanating from a formation to the north. "What have you found, little one?" Track murmured, reviewing the scan data. The energy pattern was unlike anything he'd seen before, except, he realized with a start, it bore similarities to the energy signature of the nucleus core. Despite his still healing wound, Track knew he needed to investigate. He fashioned a more secure seal for his damaged EVA suit, rigged a filtration system from station components, and prepared for an expedition. The journey to the northern formation was arduous. The terrain was treacherous, with shifting sands that concealed sharp rock formations, and the thin atmosphere made every exertion a struggle. ARC-9 scouted ahead, identifying the safest path. But it still took Track nearly a full day to cover the distance. What he found exceeded his wildest expectations. Nestled within a natural amphitheater of rock was a structure that was definitively not natural. A dome of seamless material that reflected the dim sunlight with an iridescent sheen. It was clearly alien in origin, its architecture similar to certain sections of the celestial fang. "Xilian," Track breathed, approaching the structure cautiously. "Has to be." The entrance was concealed, but ARC-9 scans revealed a pattern of energy flows that suggested an access point. After hours of careful study and trial and error, Track activated a mechanism that caused a section of the dome to become translucent, then permeable, allowing entry. Inside was a repository of technology that made Track's engineer heart race. The chamber was a perfect sphere, its interior surfaces covered in what appeared to be data storage devices. At the center, suspended much like the nucleus core had been aboard the Celestial Fang, was a device that Track initially took for another core. But this one was dormant, its crystalline structure cloudy and dark. A memory vault, he realized, examining the technology without touching it. They left their knowledge here, using ARC-9 to interface with the alien systems, a process that required extensive modifications to the drone's scanning protocols. Track was able to access some of the stored information. Much of it was incomprehensible, the product of a civilization whose thought processes were fundamentally different from human understanding. But certain technical schematics were clear enough, including designs that matched the weapon system he discovered on the Celestial Fang. "The giant destroyer," Track muttered, scrolling through the alien data on his data logger screen. "They actually built it. Used it. Maybe." The data indicated the weapon was designed to channel massive amounts of energy through a focusing array, creating a beam capable of destabilizing molecular bonds at a planetary scale. The nucleus core wasn't just a power source. It was a control mechanism, a regulator that prevented the weapon from consuming itself in the process. But there was more. The Xilian records showed alternative applications for the technology, power generation systems that could harness the core's unique properties to provide nearly limitless clean energy. The same principles that made it a devastating weapon could sustain entire civilizations. As Track absorbed this information, a new alert from ARC-9 dragged his attention back to the present. The drone had detected movement outside the dome, large organic signatures approaching rapidly. Track cursed, grabbing his makeshift weapon, a repurposed mining tool he'd found at the station, and moving to the entrance. Through the translucent section, he could see them, reptilian creatures the size of large earth dogs, with 6 limbs and bony protrusions along their spines. They moved with predatory purpose, circling the dome. "Talogs," Track said, recalling the sparse xenobiology data on Talon 4 in his suit's database. "Thought they were extinct." The creatures seemed agitated, possibly drawn by the energy emanating from the dome now that its systems were active. One lunged at the entrance, only to be repelled by an invisible barrier. But its attack triggered something in the others, and they began a coordinated assault on the dome, searching for weaknesses. Track knew the barrier wouldn't hold forever against determined predators. He needed to return to the station before nightfall, which meant going through the Talog pack. "ARC-9, diversion protocol," he commanded. Having programmed this contingency, the drone emitted a high-pitched sound and a flashing light pattern designed to distract predators, then shot out of the dome entrance on its makeshift propulsion system. The Talogs gave chase, their attention diverted long enough for Track to emerge from the dome and begin moving in the opposite direction. But one creature, larger than the others, with distinctive red markings along its spine, remained behind, fixing Track with an unsettlingly intelligent gaze. "Great," Track muttered, raising his makeshift weapon. "The Alpha stayed home." The creature attacked with startling speed. Track fired the mining tool, which emitted a concentrated sonic pulse designed to fracture rock. The Talog Alpha shrieked in pain but kept coming, its claws raking across Track's already damaged suit. The fight was brief, but vicious. Track managed to drive the creature back with repeated sonic pulses, but not before sustaining fresh injuries, gashes across his leg and arm that, while not life-threatening, would further complicate his survival. By the time he limped back to the station, night had fallen, bringing with it a dramatic temperature drop that made his injured body shiver uncontrollably. Arc-9 was waiting, having completed its diversion and returned via a programmed route. Track collapsed inside the airlock, blood seeping through his torn suit. "Not my best day out," he told the drone weakly, "but worth it." In the days that followed, as he treated his new injuries and reflected on his discoveries, a plan began to form in Trask's mind. He had the nucleus core. He had access to Xelian technical data. He had a partially functioning research station with basic manufacturing capabilities. Perhaps most importantly, he had nothing but time and a burning desire to ensure the giant destroyer technology never fell into the wrong hands, whether those hands belonged to Earth or the Galactic Coalition. "I'm going to build it," he told ARC-9 as he sketched designs on his data logger. "Not the Planet Killer version. Something smaller, more controlled. A prototype that can demonstrate the technology's potential for energy generation rather than destruction." It was an audacious plan bordering on insanity, but it gave him purpose beyond mere survival. And if, by some miracle, he ever made it off Talonfur, he would have proof that the technology's highest use was not as a weapon. The work began immediately. Track converted a section of the station into a rudimentary workshop, salvaging components from every system that wasn't essential for his survival. The geological survey equipment proved particularly valuable, as it could be repurposed to analyze and process the native metals of Talonfur. One such metal, which Track dubbed Talonite, had extraordinary properties: lightweight, yet incredibly strong, with excellent conductivity when properly refined. It would make an ideal housing for the delicate components of his prototype. Progress was painstakingly slow. Many of the tools he needed had to be created from scratch. Power was limited, forcing him to work in short bursts when the geothermal tap was producing at its peak, and his injuries, though healing, restricted his physical capabilities. ARC-9 became indispensable, serving as both assistant and companion. Track expanded its programming, enabling it to perform increasingly complex tasks. He found himself talking to the drone constantly, staving off the crushing loneliness of his isolation. "The focusing array is the key," he explained to ARC-9 as they worked on a particularly delicate component. "Too narrow, and the energy becomes destructive. Too diffuse, and it's useless. We need the perfect balance." Weeks turned into months. Track kept a journal on his data logger, recording both technical notes and personal reflections. The entries chronicled his struggles, triumphs, and the slow psychological toll of complete isolation. Day 73. One entry read, "Wound finally sealed completely. Still limited mobility in left arm. ARC-9's sampling mechanism failed again. Improvised replacement using filtration components. Ran test on primary conductor. Failed catastrophically. Starting over tomorrow. Dreamed of Earth last night. Woke up crying." The Talogs remained a constant threat. They seemed drawn to the energy emissions from Track's experiments, leading to several close encounters. The Talog Alpha returned repeatedly, displaying an unnerving persistence that forced Track to develop more sophisticated defenses for the station. 6 months after his arrival on Talonfur, Track completed the first functioning prototype. It was crude by any standard, a handheld device that bore little resemblance to the planet-destroying weapon of the Xelian design, but it incorporated the fundamental principles. At its heart was the nucleus core, now housed in a carefully crafted Talonite chamber. The first test was conducted inside the station's main chamber, with every possible safety precaution in place. Track targeted a block of solid talonite, adjusted the power settings to minimum, and activated the device. A beam of coherent energy, blue-white and impossibly bright, lanced from the prototype and struck the metal block. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the block split perfectly in half, the cut surfaces mirror-smooth and glowing with residual heat. "It works," Track whispered, staring at the results in awe. "It actually works." But the test revealed critical flaws. The energy consumption was far higher than his calculations had predicted, nearly draining the nucleus core. Heat buildup in the focusing array had warped several components. And, most concerning, the energy discharge had created a detectable signal that, within hours, brought a swarm of talogs to the station perimeter. Track spent the next several weeks refining the design, addressing each flaw methodically. The second prototype was more efficient, with improved thermal management and better energy control. But it was still far from the elegant solution he envisioned. Then, on day 212, everything changed. ARC-9's regular scanning routine detected an orbital signal. A communication burst from a spacecraft. Trake's heart raced as he analyzed the data. It was from the ISS Resolve, transmitting on an encrypted Earth-Navy frequency. They hadn't forgotten him. They were coming back. But as he decoded the transmission, his hope turned to dread. The message wasn't a rescue coordination. It was a tactical update intended for Fleet Command. The ISS Resolve reported that Core of Rex had acquired the primary encoding module for the giant destroyer technology and was en route to Earth to deliver it to Coalition forces. "No," Track breathed, reading the message again. "If they have the encoding module and get their hands on a nucleus core..." He didn't finish the thought. He didn't need to. With both components, the Coalition could theoretically build a functioning giant destroyer. And while Earth might not immediately fall victim to such a weapon, the political consequences would be too severe. The balance of power would shift irrevocably. Track was still absorbing this revelation when ARC-9 triggered a proximity alert. Something had entered Talonphi's atmosphere, something large and moving with purpose, directly toward the station. Through the station's damaged external cameras, Track watched a sleek spacecraft descend. It wasn't Earth-Navy design. The configuration matched Xilian architecture, similar to the Celestial Fang, but scaled down for atmospheric flight. A Coalition vessel. They tracked the signal. Track realized. His prototype tests must have created energy signatures distinctive enough to detect from orbit, signatures that matched Xilian technology. They're coming for the core. He had minutes, perhaps seconds, to prepare, grabbing the prototype weapon and as many of his notes as he could secure in a portable case. Track retreated to the station's lower level, where he had constructed a makeshift bunker in case of severe dust storms. Through ARC-9's remote visual feed, he watched as the Coalition ship landed 500 meters from the station. A boarding ramp extended, and figures emerged, 7 in total, wearing environmental suits adapted for Talonphi's atmosphere. Leading them was a figure Track recognized instantly, even at a distance, Core of Rex. "She survived," he muttered, a cold dread settling in his stomach. "And now she's come to finish the job." Cora's team approached the station methodically, weapons at the ready. They breached the main airlock with practiced efficiency and began a systematic search of the facility. Track knew he couldn't hide indefinitely. The station wasn't large enough, and they would eventually find his bunker. He needed a plan, not just to survive, but to ensure the nucleus core didn't fall into Cora's hands. "ARC-9, he whispered into his comm unit. "Execute Protocol Omega." The drone, currently hidden in a ventilation duct, acknowledged the command with a single, light pulse. Protocol Omega was a last resort measure Track had programmed weeks earlier, a series of system overloads designed to create confusion and, if necessary, render the station uninhabitable. As the coalition team reached the main laboratory, where Track had conducted most of his work, ARC-9 initiated the protocol. Emergency lights began flashing erratically. The station's remaining functional systems went haywire, air circulation fans spinning at maximum, heating elements cycling on and off, data terminals displaying random patterns. In the confusion, Track moved, using access tunnels beneath the main floor, maintenance pathways he'd discovered during his months of residence. He navigated toward the station's power core, where the geothermal tap connected to the facility's systems. His plan was desperate but simple. The nucleus core, when properly configured, could amplify energy. If he could connect it to the geothermal tap and create a controlled overload, the resulting energy surge would be devastating to anyone inside the station, including himself. If he couldn't reach a safe distance in time, Track reached the power core chamber just as the station's systems began to stabilize. Cora's team must have included a tech specialist capable of countering ARC-9's disruptions. Time was running out. Working quickly, Track reconfigured his prototype, adjusting the focusing array to create a resonance field rather than a directed beam. He connected the device directly to the geothermal tap's main conduit, using his data logger to calculate the precise settings needed. "Energy building," he murmured, watching the readouts climb. Resonance approaching critical threshold. A noise behind him. The hatch to the power core chamber sliding open. Track spun, raising the mining tool he'd kept as a sidearm, but he was too slow. A stun blast caught him in the chest, sending him sprawling against the wall. The breath knocked from his lungs. Cora Vrex entered, flanked by two of her team. Her environmental suit was more streamlined than theirs, custom-fitted to her hybrid physiology. She removed her helmet, revealing the pale, almost luminescent skin and large, dark eyes of her Gillian heritage. "Engineer Morgan," she said, her voice as coldly melodic as he remembered. "I must admit, I'm impressed by your resilience. We were certain you had perished aboard the Celestial Fang." Track struggled to regain his breath, eyes darting to his prototype. The energy buildup was continuing, the nucleus core beginning to pulse more rapidly as it approached resonance. "Sorry to disappoint," he managed to say. Cora noticed the direction of his gaze and moved toward the prototype. "Ah, I see you've been busy. A functioning prototype? How enterprising." She examined the setup, her expression shifting from curiosity to realization. "And now you're attempting to destroy it rather than let it fall into my hands. Predictably noble." She gestured to one of her companions, who moved to disconnect the device. Track lunged forward, despite the lingering effects of the stun blast, only to be caught by the second coalition operative and forced back against the wall. "Your prototype is impressive for something built in these conditions," Cora continued, now holding the device. "But ultimately unnecessary. We already possess the encoding module from the Celestial Fang. All we needed was a nucleus core." She smiled thinly. "And now we have one." "You don't understand," Track said, struggling against his captor's grip. "The technology isn't just for weapons. It can generate clean energy, power entire planets without destruction? Without giving its wielder absolute power?" Cora laughed. "That's precisely why we need it, Morgan. The Coalition cannot allow Earth to possess this advantage, nor can we ignore its potential for our own interests." The operative who had disconnected the prototype suddenly stiffened, looking at a readout on his suit. "Commander, the energy signature is still building. The tap is approaching critical pressure." Cora's expression hardened. "What have you done?" Track smiled grimly. "Insurance policy. The moment you disconnected my device, the safety protocols disengaged. The geothermal tap is now building pressure with nowhere to release it. This entire chamber will be flooded with superheated plasma in about 30 seconds." It was a bluff, mostly. The disconnection had indeed created an instability, but not as severe as he claimed. Still, The energy readings were climbing dangerously. "Get the core and move out," Cora ordered sharply. "We have what we came for." As her operative began extracting the nucleus core from the prototype, Track made his final play. He'd positioned himself precisely, and now he kicked hard against a specific panel in the wall behind him. It gave way, revealing a manual override he'd installed for the geothermal tap. Before anyone could stop him, Track pulled the emergency release. Superheated steam erupted from vents around the chamber, instantly raising the temperature to nearly unbearable levels. In the confusion, Track broke free from his captor, diving toward Cora and the prototype. What followed was chaos. Alarms blared as the station's remaining safety systems detected the critical failure. Steam filled the chamber, reducing visibility to near zero. Track grappled with Cora for control of the prototype, both of them gasping in the increasingly toxic air. "You'll kill us both!" Cora shouted over the roar of escaping steam. "Better than letting you weaponize this technology," Track shot back, his fingers finally closing around the prototype. In a desperate move, Cora activated a secondary device at her belt, the encoding module she'd mentioned. "If I can't have it, no one will." The module emitted a pulse designed to render the nucleus core inert, a failsafe built into the original Xelian design. But Track's modifications had altered the core's response patterns. Instead of deactivating, it entered a feedback loop with the encoding module. The resulting energy surge was beyond anything Track had calculated. A sphere of blue-white energy expanded from the prototype, engulfing both him and Cora. He felt a sensation like being simultaneously burned and frozen, his every nerve ending screaming in protest. Through the blinding light, he saw Cora's face contort in agony as the energy overwhelmed her hybrid physiology. Her body began to disintegrate, molecules pulled apart by the very weapon technology she had sought to control. Track should have suffered the same fate, but something protected him. Perhaps his proximity to the prototype, or some quirk of his modifications to the nucleus core. The energy washed over him, through him, leaving him intact but changed in ways he couldn't yet comprehend. When the surge finally dissipated, Track found himself alone in the chamber. Where Cora had stood was nothing but ash and the twisted remains of her environmental suit. The encoding module was a melted lump of unrecognizable material. And the prototype. The prototype was transformed. The focusing array had reconfigured itself in response to the surge, its components rearranged into a new configuration that Track didn't recognize. The nucleus core still pulsed at its heart, but the energy signature was different, cleaner, more stable. Outside the chamber, he could hear the remaining coalition operatives calling for evacuation. They'd witnessed enough to know their mission had failed catastrophically, and their commander was gone. Track collapsed against the wall, exhaustion and pain overwhelming him. But beneath it all was a sense of grim satisfaction. The immediate threat had passed. The giant destroyer would not rise again, at least not today, and not from Talon Fa. As consciousness began to fade, his last thought was of the transformed prototype. Something had changed in that energy surge, not just the device, but perhaps the nucleus core itself. And when he recovered, he would discover exactly what that change meant. The days following the confrontation with Cora Vrex were a blur of pain and semi-consciousness for Track. The energy surge had left him physically drained, with mysterious symptoms, fluctuating body temperature, heightened sensitivity to the nucleus core's energy field, and vivid dreams filled with incomprehensible Xelian symbols. When he finally regained full awareness, nearly a week had passed. The station was in ruins, most systems offline permanently. The Coalition ship was gone, its crew having fled after the death of their commander. And ARC-9, faithful to the end, had maintained a silent vigil over Track's recovery, periodically applying medical treatments from the dwindling supplies. The prototype had indeed transformed. What had once been a weapon, albeit a small-scale one, was now something else entirely. A power generation system of unprecedented efficiency. The nucleus core at its heart was unchanged externally, but its energy signature had stabilized into a pattern that Track's instruments indicated was self-sustaining. "A perpetual energy source," Track murmured, examining the readings. They were so focused on weapons they never fully explored the potential. His first priority was survival. With the station severely damaged, Track relocated to a secondary structure that had escaped the worst of the destruction. Using the transformed prototype as a power source, he was able to restore basic life support and even improve upon the original systems. As his strength returned, Track faced the hard reality of his situation. He was still stranded on Talon 4, now with even fewer resources. The prototype represented the most advanced technology in known space, but without a way to leave the planet. Its significance was academic. Then came an unexpected discovery. While salvaging components from the main station, Track found a communications array that had been shielded from the energy surge. With careful reconfiguration and power from the prototype, he might be able to establish a long-range signal, not enough for two-way communication, but perhaps sufficient to broadcast a simple distress beacon. Weeks of painstaking work followed. Track repurposed the array, cannibalizing parts from his data logger and ARC-9's non-essential systems. The drone, now more limited in function but still operational, continued to assist as best it could. The Talogs remained a constant presence, seemingly drawn to the energy emanating from the prototype. But something had changed in their behavior. The Talog Alpha, in particular, no longer approached with aggressive intent. Instead, observing from a distance with what Track could only interpret as cautious curiosity. "You feel it too, don't you?" Track said to the creature during one of its visits to the perimeter. "It's different now. Not a weapon, but something else." 6 months after the confrontation with Cora, Track achieved a milestone. The repurposed communications array successfully broadcasted its first signal, a simple repeating pattern that identified the location and included basic information about the sender. It wasn't much, but it was something that might attract attention if anyone happened to be monitoring that frequency in this remote system. Meanwhile, he continued to explore the prototype's capabilities. What had begun as a power source for basic survival evolved into something more comprehensive. Track expanded the system, creating what he called the Power Nexus, a distributed energy network that not only powered his shelter, but began to transform the immediate environment. The energy field generated by the Nexus had unexpected effects on Talon Phi's harsh conditions. Atmospheric toxins were neutralized within its range. The soil, once barren, showed signs of molecular restructuring that might eventually support simple plant life. And the Talogs, after initial wariness, began to establish territories just outside the field's perimeter, as if recognizing a boundary of safety. Day 293, Track recorded in his journal. Power Nexus stable at 87% efficiency. Atmospheric quality within field improved by 42% since implementation. Expanded field radius to 500 meters. Detected microbial activity in soil samples. First signs of life beyond the Talogs. The Alpha brought down a smaller creature today and left it at the perimeter. A gift? Or just coincidence? Either way, I'm no longer alone here. A full year passed since Track's arrival on Talon 4. The anniversary found him sitting outside his shelter, watching the alien sunset paint the dusty landscape in shades of crimson and gold. The Talog Alpha rested nearby, now a regular visitor that Track had cautiously begun to consider something akin to a companion. The Power Nexus had transformed a significant area around the shelter into what could almost be called habitable. A rudimentary ecosystem was developing, with microbial life giving way to more complex organisms. Track had even succeeded in cultivating simple earth crops in a protected greenhouse, supplementing his dwindling emergency rations. It was on this anniversary that ARC-9 detected the approach of another spacecraft. Track's heart raced as he checked the readings. Not Coalition design this time, but Earth naval configuration. Someone had received his signal. The ship landed at a cautious distance, and a team emerged in environmental suits. Track watched their approach through a makeshift periscope, unwilling to reveal himself until he could assess their intentions. The Talog Alpha had disappeared at the first sign of the ship, retreating to a safe distance. The team moved with the precision of military personnel, but carried scientific equipment rather than weapons. Their leader, a woman whose suit bore the insignia of Earth Science Division rather than Naval Command, directed the others to take readings of the power nexus field. Finally, satisfied they weren't an immediate threat, Track emerged from his shelter. The team froze at the sight of him, understandably, given his appearance. A year on Talon 4 had left him gaunt, his Navy uniform long since replaced by an improvised garment made from environmental suit material and station fabrics. His beard was full, his hair long and tied back. "Lieutenant Travis Morgan," he called out, hands raised to show he was unarmed. "Earth Navy Engineering Corps, formerly of the ISS Resolve." The team leader approached cautiously, removing her helmet to reveal a face that conveyed both shock and something like awe. "Dr. Elena Reyes, Earth Science Division. We received your signal. But, Lieutenant, you're listed as killed in action, over a year ago." "Reports of my death were greatly exaggerated," Track replied, with a dry humor he'd almost forgotten he possessed. Though not for lack of trying on the Coalition's part. The team was not a rescue mission, at least not originally. They had been dispatched to investigate unusual energy readings from Talon Fru, readings that didn't match any known natural phenomenon or Earth technology. Trass's distress signal had been detected only as they entered the system. A fortunate coincidence. "What exactly have you built here, Lieutenant?" Dr. Reyes asked, gesturing to the visible components of the power nexus extending from Track's shelter. Track hesitated. These were Earth personnel, but his experience with Maya Singh had left him wary of blind trust. "That's complicated," he finally said. "And before I explain, I need to know something. What's the current situation between Earth and the Coalition?" "Tense but stable," answered another team member, a man whose uniform identified him as Commander Julian Vega, the military liaison. "There was nearly an escalation last year when a Coalition Special Ops team was lost in this sector, but nothing came of it. Why?" Track made his decision. These people needed to understand what they had stumbled upon, not just the technology, but its implications. "I think you'd better come inside," he said. "I have a story to tell you, and it starts with a derelict called the Celestial Fang." Over the next several hours, Track recounted his experiences, from the discovery of the Gillian warship to his final confrontation with Korov Rex. He explained the giant destroyer technology, the nucleus core, and most importantly, the transformation of the prototype from weapon to energy source. "The Coalition wanted it as a planet killer," he concluded. "Earth Naval Command probably would have used it the same way. But what I've built here, what the technology evolved into, is something far more valuable. A sustainable energy source that can transform environments, support life where none existed before." He gestured to the monitors, showing the developing ecosystem outside. "This is just the beginning of what's possible." Dr. Reyes was visibly moved by the demonstration. Commander Vega, more pragmatic, asked the obvious question, "And you believe this technology cannot be weaponized again?" "I didn't say that," Track admitted. "The fundamental principles are the same. In the wrong hands, with the right modifications, it could revert to its original purpose. That's why I've been reluctant to broadcast exactly what I have here." "Then why tell us now?" Vega pressed. Track smiled tiredly. "Because I've spent a year alone on this rock, and I've had a lot of time to think. This technology is too important to die with me. It needs to be developed, refined, shared, but with the right safeguards, by people who understand its potential beyond destruction. The team spent several days at Track's shelter, examining the power nexus and collecting data. What they found both confirmed Track's claims and revealed aspects of the technology he hadn't yet discovered. The energy field wasn't just supporting life. It was accelerating positive evolutionary adaptations in the native organisms, including the talogs. A decision had to be made. The team had come in a research vessel with limited space, not equipped for a permanent outpost. They could take Track back to Earth, a prospect that filled him with both longing and apprehension. But the power nexus was too large and integrated to relocate. "We could request a dedicated research team," Dr. Reyes suggested. "Establish a proper outpost here, the Talon Nexus. Study the technology. Develop it under controlled conditions, away from political pressures." "And who would oversee this outpost?" Vega asked skeptically. All eyes turned to Track. He hadn't considered the possibility of staying voluntarily, of transforming his prison into a purpose. But as he thought about it, the idea took hold. Who better to guide the development of this technology than the person who understood both its potential and its dangers? "I would," he said finally, "on one condition. This stays scientific, not military. The moment anyone tries to weaponize it again, I shut it all down." He held Vega's gaze steadily. "I've had a year to build in failsafes. Believe me when I say I can and will destroy this technology if it's misused." Negotiations followed, tense at times, but ultimately productive. Earth would establish the Talon Nexus as a scientific outpost, with Track as its director, and Dr. Reyes as the liaison to Earth Science Division. Military presence would be minimal and protective rather than controlling, and the existence of the giant destroyer technology would remain classified, with only the energy generation applications being developed openly. 2 months later, the first permanent structures of the Talon Nexus were complete. A team of 12 scientists and engineers had joined Track, each vetted personally by Dr. Reyes for both their expertise and their ethical stance on weapons development. The power nexus had been expanded, its field now encompassing nearly a square kilometer of gradually transforming landscape. The talogs, initially wary of the increased human presence, had adapted in unexpected ways. The Alpha, now unofficially named First Friend by the team, had become something of a station mascot, occasionally bringing specimens of new life forms emerging in the outer ranges of the Nexus field. On the evening before the research vessel was scheduled to depart, taking with it Commander Vega and the preliminary research findings, Track stood at the perimeter of the Nexus field, watching the alien sunset. Dr. Reyes joined him, her environmental suit now unnecessary within the field's protective influence. "Earth won't stay satisfied with just energy technology forever," she said quietly. "Eventually, someone will push to explore the weapons applications again." "I know," Track replied. "That's why we need to make the energy benefits so overwhelming that weaponizing it becomes unthinkable. Create something so valuable for life that to turn it toward death becomes an act of insanity." "Is that possible?" she asked. "Human history suggests otherwise." Track watched as First Friend appeared at the edge of their vision, now accompanied by 2 smaller talogs. Offspring, perhaps, or simply younger members of what was becoming a pack adapted to the Nexus environment. "A year ago, I would have agreed with you," he said. "But now, I've seen what this technology can create rather than destroy. I've watched life emerge from a dead world." He gestured to the talogs, to the green shoots now visible in what had once been barren soil. "If there's hope for Talonfur, there's hope for humanity." As darkness fell, the power nexus activated its night cycle, bathing the outpost in a gentle blue-green glow, reminiscent of the nucleus core itself. In his quarters, Track made a final entry in the journal he had kept since his first days on the planet. "Once I was given a superweapon," he wrote. "I chose a different path. Perhaps someday, goodness will prevail." He closed the journal and stepped outside to watch the stars, no longer as a prisoner of this world, but as its steward. The transformation of Talon 4 had begun. Whether the transformation of humanity's relationship with power would follow remained to be seen. But for the first time since the Celestial Fang, Track Morgan allowed himself to hope.